All right, another episode of Jung Naiv. I have a new guest. Who are you?
Hey, I'm Yuli Novak. I'm the director of an organization named B'Tselem, which is an Israeli human rights organization. I'm an Israeli. I live in Jaffa with my family, with my wife and son. What else do you want to know about me?
What brings you to Berlin, first and foremost?
To come and speak to you and to other people around who I think care about what takes place on the ground in Israel-Palestine.
Do people actually care in Germany? Like, you probably talk to some organization, politicians and all this?
Yes, I think people care very much. And as far as I can see and feel, people are very much confused also about the situation and about how to react to what takes place. And in a way, I can relate to that because the situation on the ground in Israel in Palestine got to be so extreme that I think it's hard to make sense of what takes place and how to react to it, especially in an environment that very used to stand by Israel. So in that sense, I think what takes place now in Germany is super important, and to have this conversation and to try to really understand what's going on the ground is essential.
What's so confusing for the people you talk to?
We're just getting straight into that. No, I'm not saying anything new here, but again, in Germany, as far as I can see and feel it and understand it, there is kind of an immediate tendency to stand by Israel for many reasons that we can go into, but probably people who watch us know that. And
German history when it comes to the Holocaust and
and the relation to Israel,
of course,
throughout the years, right, decades. And that's a quite, I think, challenging position while this state, the state of Israel, is operating in a very problematic way. Now, as much as the action of Israel is becoming more and more extreme, more and more violent, more and more clear in their racist and violent nature, like what we see takes place in Gaza and in the West Bank, and even inside Israel, I think that's a moment where, again, I'm saying it very carefully, but where Germans are kind of feel a bit more uncomfortable, or what I called confused. Maybe it's not the best word to use. But I can relate to it because I think many Israelis are facing kind of the same difficulty in the past, I would say, 2 years. Seeing what the Israeli system is doing, seeing what our society becoming to be, see the results of our actions on the ground, first and foremost in Gaza, and somehow still try to figure out what you're supposed to do in the face of it. And that's a challenging position.
We're going to talk about everything and what B'Tselem is assessing. What do you think about the war in Gaza, what's happening in Israel, the West Bank, and all this? Do you think many people, especially when it comes to the political class, and you talk to many of them, that they want to remain comfortable? Because you just said it makes them uncomfortable. Like when it comes to Israel,
in Germany,
it's like it seems to be like it's safer to stay comfortable and not look closely.
Well, it's always much more comfortable and safe to stay where you are, right? But there is a moment, and I think we are in such a moment where it's. I'm not sure if that's still the case because of what you see in front of your eyes. So as much as far as reality on the ground is being shown and people see it, it's getting harder and harder to kind of set your mind around it and kind of take your previous assumptions and reconcile them with the current situation. But maybe we should be more precise and less theoretical about it. You know, I'm sitting here as an Israeli. I grew up in Israel. I was born in Israel and grew up in Israel, and was born into a system that told me and that taught me, and for me it was obvious that, first of all, this entity and this structure that I'm living in is essentially a just one and a democratic space. And we have many problems, among them problem with the Palestinians that we need to solve, and we're doing our best to solve it. And that's kind of the mindset. We're the good guys, there are the bad guys. We need to kind of set things up.
The Palestinians are the bad guys, or
they
the surrounding Arab states?
It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same. But they are basically the enemy that we need to find a way to live either side by side or... And when you are born into that mindset, it's very hard to make the kind of move or to acknowledge the fact that it's actually holds some assumptions that are very problematic or in real contradiction to values that I thought we're having as or holding as a society. Democratic values, values of, equality, of freedom, of other things. And once things are kind of, at least for me, I was evolving in my understanding of the reality around me, and that was way later in my 20s. And after that, you realize that there are contradictions, that it's very hard to live with, to hold on to the concept of this just democratic state, Israel, for Jews, while other people who are Palestinians, who are half of the people who live in the region between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, are actually deprived of rights.
So equality for Jews only?
Democracy for Jews only. And here, I think we can, if you want, we can directly dive into the notion of apartheid, which I know is a harsh one for many people, but it's kind of obvious once you see it and you feel it, because the concept of apartheid is to take the space and to divide it into section and to try and create something that is called democracy, but only for in part of the area, right? And to preserve a majority of one kind of people, of one group over the other in that territory. And that's exactly what Israel have done throughout the years. And that's a very problematic definition of democracy, right? It's democracy on part of the territory and for part of the people.
Can there be democracy and apartheid? No.
I mean, you answered it. Can there be? Well,
like when it comes to the German government, they're like almost not shying away anymore from the assessment of apartheid in the West Bank, in the occupied West Bank. But that's different because like the West Bank is not part of Israel officially. I mean, there are settlers living there. The settlers who are allowed to vote, although they don't live in Israel.
They are citizens.
But they're citizens. But they shouldn't be able to vote. That's why.
Why they shouldn't be able to vote?
Because they don't live in Israel.
Okay, that's if you see that. Okay, so let's break it up a bit. Okay. All right. So first, when we were talking about Israel, held this notion of being democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, right? It's holding that narrative that's this ethos. Now, first of all, it's a democracy that since its establishment created a mechanism of law and other rules that were oriented to make sure that first we'll have a majority of Jews around, including what we call the law of return, right? That enable Jews from all over the world to immigrate to Israel while denying the same rights from descendants of Palestinians around, but many others. So that's the first. Then in 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and never officially annexed them. But if we're looking at what takes place on the ground, we are talking about annexation de facto. So we at B'Tselem already 4 years ago published a paper that identify the whole area between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea as the area under one regime, and this is the Israeli regime, and under Israeli control, right? And once you look at this whole territory, and you see that what Israel did is actually divided this territory into different sections. Israel itself, within 67 borders, within the Green Line, what we call 48 Israel. And then you have the West Bank, and then you have Gaza. And in each territory, Israel granted different set of rights or denied rights from Palestinians. We're talking about rights to live, for citizenship, for immigration, rights of movement around, to land, to own land, and to have land. So you get all this kind of spectrum of rights that are being either granted or denied to different groups of Palestinians in different areas. And of course, when we're talking about Gaza, and that's even before the last 2 years, right? They were the group who were deprived the most of rights, either movement rights, because they were kind of closed in Gaza for the last 17 years before 2023, right? Under siege. But also in many other ways, also suffering from ongoing military campaigns once in a few years, that massive destruction and killing, nothing compared to what we saw later on, but still. So when I'm talking about apartheid, I'm talking about the whole territory, the entire territory under this regime, under the control of the Israeli system. And now this one regime, we cannot differ between the regime that is in control over the West Bank and the regime that is in control, the Israeli regime that is in control over the West Bank, and that the one that is within Israel, right? It's the same government. It's the same system. You cannot do this. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I don't think it's logical to do this differentiation. The only one who
like some people say, well, the IDF is in control of the West Bank. That's why it's a different system than what's compared to Israel proper.
Yeah. So as far as I know, the IDF is completely under the control of the Israeli government, and was since ever.
As far as I know, yes.
Yeah, it's not a separate body. And here again, when we're talking about the regime, and I insist to use this term, and I know it might raise some uncomfort among you, maybe, I don't know. But I'm using it because I'm not only talking about a specific government or even the state. The state is there. The state of Israel is there. I'm talking about the system. And this system have an ideology. And this ideology from the establishment of Israel was an ideology of how to keep Jewish superiority over as much of the land that we can. And throughout the years, this regime used different tactics and different methods in order to do so. So in that sense, when we're talking about protecting human rights and protecting people who live on that land, I think if we're not we have to address the system, the political system that is in control. And that is one political system since the establishment of Israel till today.
And this ideology, it's Zionism? Or what would you call it? Like colonialism?
I would say it is, for sure, it is Zionism. But again, Zionism is also, we're getting into this discussion about concept, which is a very important one. But I just had a conversation earlier today that when you say Zionism, for different people, it means different things.
Yeah, and Israeli, like I have friends in Israel who, just a term that is used loosely, which for most people, it's considered like a good citizen in Israel. Like,
to be a Zionist.
Yeah.
Of course, in the Israeli eyes, you have to be a Zionist. If you're not a Zionist, you're really out of the tent, out of the camp. It's not not to be Zionist is not to be Israeli in a sense. But again, I think for Israelis and for others, Zionism is a very different thing because I was born into Zionism and never thought about it as a political structure, but as a project, a very positive project, who brought my grandparents into that land after the Holocaust, right? Who kind of saved them and saved our family and many others.
Your grandparents were Holocaust survivors?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. From one side of the family.
So from your other side, your other grandfather was a member of IGUM?
Mm-hmm.
Like a pre-1948 Jewish terrorist organization in Palestine?
Yeah, you can call it that way. But the militia that opposed the British mandate before and acted had an armed struggle for liberation.
Right.
Yeah.
It was led by Begin.
Right.
And I think it was called terrorist, right? Or that's what. But then he became prime minister and all this.
Yeah, but again, that was a struggle in the eyes, and that's the complexity of this situation when we're talking about the colonialism in the Israeli aspect. So again, Israel, I think, and we see a lot of patterns of settler colonialism when we look at Israel and how it was established, but it's also a very specific type or specific circumstances like any other place of settler colonialism with some previous connection of Jews to the land and with this struggle for liberation that took place also by Jews, right? But again, we don't have to go into all that. What I'm saying that if to go back to Zionism as a concept is really a complex one because it took me many, many years to understand that when Zionism is not only this identity, but also a political structure that dispossess the indigenous people of the land, that disregard or portray them, Palestinians who live there, as non-existent. The notion that many people know about of land with no people for people without the land, right? Mm-hmm. And that was something that we grew up upon. That was the narrative that as an Israeli, a Zionist Israeli, I grew up upon, knowing that the creation of Israel was kind of a miracle. Mm-hmm. You don't hear about what happened to the Palestinians who live there. You don't hear about the Nakba. You don't learn in school about those things were out of the discourse completely when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and nowadays they are like completely out of the public discourse because it's
in Israel.
In Israel, yeah. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, yeah. If we go back to you ask me what is this? Of course, the Israeli political system in Israel is Zionist one, and it is a specific kind of advance of or kind of where Zionism got to throughout the decades is what we see now. I know, and I think we need to be aware of the fact that within the Zionist movement, there were other factions in previous time that it could have been maybe developing into a different direction. I don't know. But the only reality there is that the political system we have today is what Zionism turned to be.
So when you grew up, I mean, you were born in 1982 in Tel Aviv. When you grew up, people, like, you were taught that Israel is democracy.
Definitely.
When did you realize that it's not a democracy? Like you said once, the Zionist Israeli regime is at the bottom undemocratic, right?
Yeah.
And the political structure has to go.
Definitely.
If it's undemocratic, when did you realize that it's undemocratic at the bottom? When was the turning point?
There were few for me. I think the first was in my mid-20s, when I was in university and I decided to join friends who went to demonstrate in the West Bank. There were weekly demonstrations back then against the building of the separation wall. It was the early 2000s. And I joined a demonstration and in a village in the West Bank, the village of Bil'in. Today, it's these demonstrations are not existing anymore because the crackdown on Palestinian resistance is almost complete. But back then, every Friday, there was a demonstration, and I joined it. And I was mostly curious about just to see what it is all about, right?
Did you just join some friends or something?
Yeah. That was
Yuli,
exactly,
let's go, all right?
I met some people in university who were taking part in this demonstration. I didn't have this political understanding, deep political understanding of what we're talking about. And I remember going there and taking, for me, I was living in democracy. In democracy, you can demonstrate, right? It's our right for free speech. And I remember we going there, and it was like, it was very strange. On the one side, there are Palestinians and some international and us Israelis who are standing there, and peaceful demonstration, really, no, like people shouting. And then the Israeli army is coming from the other side and start shooting gas grenade over the demonstration. And I was pretty shocked of that because I said, why? I mean, till then, I never thought about the fact that that's the reaction when Palestinians are trying to demonstrate in the West Bank. That the notion of free speech is not for everybody. Is inside Israel for Jews. But once you cross this unmarked border into the West Bank, they are completely denied and the reaction will be violence, like serious violence. And that was for me very shocking because it was the first time I'm standing in front of an Israeli soldier. It's very confusing.
It's the IDF, Yuli.
Yeah.
It's Israel Defense Force. Maybe they were defending Israel from something. From protests.
No, I'm not. I don't want to be cynical about it because, you're laughing about it, but I think for Israelis, there is a really deep belief that that's what the Israeli army is doing. And that was a turning point for me to understand that, we're calling it Israel Defense Force, but it's not necessarily what each and every soldier is doing. And from there, I start going more and more to the West Bank and met with Palestinians for the first time in my life. And
wait, you never met Palestinians?
Not really.
When you grew up?
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, you were from Tel Aviv. There's an Arab community.
Yeah, because I grew up in apartheid. But that's not something I knew back then. Because the separation goes deep. And anyway, you asked me when was my understanding that it's not a democracy, and I marked a moment where something cracked inside me. But I had to go, and we can talk about what happened in between, but if I kind of jump, I don't know, to my mid-30s, I spent a few years in South Africa. And I met with Afrikaners, who are the white South Africans, right? The one that operated the apartheid regime for 50 years in there. And I talked to them, and I heard from them things like, we were the only democracy, or we believed we were the only democracy in Africa during the apartheid. Now you hear that and say, okay, I know that. Or if we won't keep the apartheid system in place, they will throw us to the sea. Now it's the language is the same language in which I grew up in. We are the only democracy in the Middle East. Now, white South African during apartheid really believed that they are a democracy. Taking the whole territory of what is today South Africa, divide it into different sections, and create a democracy for
white minority
that become a majority within the space that is called the state. And the other parts are the Bantustan, are the parts that are not part of the state, right? So going back to... And I think in South Africa was the first time that I already knew that something is wrong with the place I live in and the regime I live in. But in South Africa, it was for me I understood for the first time the notion of apartheid and what it means to live under apartheid, and how much apartheid also work with element of fear of what will happen if something will change, what will happen to us if we lose, if we let go just a minute even we lose our losing our control over the other, over the Palestinians in our case.
Like in a way saying, like, if we don't do this, if we don't have this political structure, this kind of regime, then the entire state of Israel will be gone, and
they throw us to the sea. that's the metaphor, right? But it will be unsafe. I mean, that's the political structure that keeps us safe.
Like it's either this or the end of everything.
Exactly. And that is one thing about apartheid, and the other thing is the blindness. To be completely blind to the not only the suffering you inflict, but not to to live in a bubble and not to know what takes place on the other side of the wall, and not to see that it has something to do with you. And so that, I think, it wasn't easy for me to understand it. But once I spent time in South Africa, and it became very clear that the similarities, again, not in the history, in the specific history, but in the mentality that enabled this kind of political structure became very clear to me.
But, I mean, almost every Israeli goes and serves in the military.
Right.
And the military, I mean, they occupy the West Bank. They do a lot. In that case, don't they see it with their own eyes when they're in the military? Like when you served in the IDF, didn't you see what occupation was like?
No.
No?
Not really, because you don't see, and that's another element of apartheid, you don't really see humans. You see the enemy. You see something that endangered you. Now, I didn't serve in the West Bank. I served inside Israel in the Air Force, so in bases inside Israel. But
you were a pilot or something?
No, not at all. but there is something about. It's very hard to explain it looking back, because now the contradictions are so clear. But I knew there is an occupation. I knew that I was against the occupation. I was a leftist. I knew that it is a debate that takes place in our society, and I want to kind of promote the separation, what we call the separation from the Palestinians. You're there, we're here. let's make peace. But I didn't realize how deep this element of preserving Jewish superiority over the entire land is kind of entrenched in this political structure. So in that sense, today it's very obvious to me that to serve in the Israeli army, in the IDF, is taking part in this oppressive system, right? It's taking part, like physically taking part. We are all taking part as Israelis to some extent, but back then I couldn't see the contradiction. For me, it was okay. There is the occupation was not an essential thing for Israeliness, but kind of a policy problem, right? We'll just fix that. We'll just need to choose another government who will make a peace deal, and that the situation will be over with.
Israel wants to choose the government of the Palestinians?
No. I'm saying choose a government for Israel.
Oh.
That's interesting that you're asking this because the Palestinians are not, when you are in this apartheid mindset, Palestinians are not really a factor.
Why?
Because of the separation, because we're two different groups, which is a lie, right? And again, I personally needed to get all the way to Africa in order to see something about my home, back home. But because this is the story you were born into, that it's us and them. In order to keep us safe, we need to have control, full control over them. And this control might come in different tools and practices. But that's a basic, that was normal. And again, I'm talking about the 80s and the 90s. And now we're in a much, much, much harsher and I think dire state.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if that's the story you were born into, that was probably the story that 7 to 8 million other Israelis, Jewish Israelis, were born into. I mean, they can't all go to South Africa,
right,
and see the light,
right?
So how? I mean, you basically say that's like a form of indoctrination.
I am saying it's indoctrination.
How can Israelis escape it? I mean, you say the political structure that we've been talking about has to go. Can Israelis...
In my view, as someone who believes in injustice and freedom, right, it has to go.
Can Israelis free themselves from this political structure? Like, I asked this because Omar Bartov was here 2 days ago, and he was like, no. Like, this change has to come from the outside. Like, the world needs to reunite and help Israelis.
Yeah, I think everything got much more complicated since October 23. Mm-hmm. And we have to relate to that in order to speak about what can happen from now on, because we can't stay in the 90s and the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And take into account that we're talking about a background, and that is something that I'll just say in B'Tselem we published a report 2 months ago. We called it Our Genocide. It wasn't easy to get there to publish this analysis, but in it we're both giving an analysis and kind of, I would say, model of how the practices that Israel is what Israel is doing in Gaza, and the oppressing, violent action that Israel is taking in Gaza is working as a genocide, and we got to the conclusion that we are talking about genocide, but also we talked about the background of what led us to that. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, we're talking about more than 75 years, or almost 75 years, of, again, this kind of system that first is of separation, second of hyper-militaristic environment, and of complete impunity, or almost complete impunity. It means that throughout generations, Israelis knew, either soldiers on the ground and commanders and officials, that they can hurt Palestinians without the vast majority of the time without paying any price and without being accountable. And with that setting, we got to October 7 and 1923. And then came Hamas attack, which was real. And I know, it was real. I was in Israel back then. It was definitely the scariest day of my life, but it was a criminal attack oriented towards attacking mostly civilians with, we're talking about 1,200 people dead, the vast majority of them civilians. Also military bases that were attacked by Hamas and other factions, but also civilians. And then 250 people got kidnapped, the Israeli and other hostages taken to Gaza, and the vast devastation. So all of this happened. And I think for many Israelis, this moment was a moment of rapture, taking down breaking something, talking about apartheid, this notion that we can live in this setting, manage the occupation or manage the conflict or our relations with Palestinians in a way that keeps the violence on one side of the fence and keep the other group, which are Jews, relatively safe on the other side of this imaginary or not imaginary fence. And in that sense, what October 7th did, the attack did, was to break something very fundamental in the basic notion of safety for Israelis, right? So it's not only the concrete outcomes, which were horrible, and the real trauma that Israel suffered on this day and after, but also the notion that what we did till today is not enough. And part of the tragedy, as I see it, is that instead of understanding at that moment that this kind of setting that we're living in, this political structure that we talked about, this conception of living under, nobody calls it apartheid, right? But under this political system is not working. The reaction of the vast majority of the Israeli public was, we have to do more. It's not enough to keep them over there and control now is not enough. We also have to kind of move into a different stage of full destruction, of extermination, of getting rid of them. It's not enough to keep them there. We need to have something more in order to keep us safe. And that's a huge tragedy. And take into account that happened while in Israel we have the most extreme right-wing government Israel ever had, right? So with people around the cabinet, the security cabinet table, like Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who for them, for decades now, they're talking about their vision about this greater Israel, right? And for them, it was a clear opportunity. Some of them even said it very loudly. It's a time of miracle, right? To
they want to expand Israel.
To expand Israel and to take control and the opportunity to erase, and that's the specific wording they use, to erase Palestinian life in Gaza and to reoccupy it and then resettle it. That was for them an opportunity, right? So take all this kind of component, the conditions that were there before October 7 that we talked about, then the event itself, which was had a huge kind of moving force or kind of a trigger to move Israel society from the notion of apartheid, separation, control, into this notion of extermination, completely destruction.
And also like the refusal to see what has happened on October 7th, the massacre and all this, in a context. Like what
that's exactly what I'm
talking about. In terms of occupation.
Yeah, and in that sense, it's interesting because in Israel, you cannot put October 7 into context. Once you try to do that, it's immediately you are considering to be Hamas supporter. There is no way to put it as
like you're justifying what Hamas has been doing.
Exactly. But I think it is also important not to kind of jump over October 7, because it was an important. If people really want to understand what Israel is doing in Gaza and to understand the genocide in Gaza, you have to understand what October 7 was and did to the Israeli society. And by the way, it's not the first genocide in history that had some kind of event that triggered violence from the perpetrators of the genocide.
There's a German genocide in early 1900s in Namibia, where the militia, Nama militia, attacked like the German settlers, and they killed like 500 to 1,000 German settlers. And the answer from the German colonizers was, "We're going to kill them all." And then the first German genocide started.
The first genocide in the 20th century. It's true.
Well, the first German genocide.
The first German genocide, and also one of the most successful ones. Because Germany really completed the mission back then. And they didn't really continue to exist as a group, right? So I see October 7 as a crucial moment to talk about, and I know it's also the most kind of sensitive, probably, moment to talk about in this history, because history haven't started in October 7 and haven't stopped in October 7. We have, and to take it out of context, because we are dealing with political violence, I believe that to take it out of its political context is actually to kind of not really relating to what we see, and in a way you're not able to oppose it or to struggle against this in the right way.
Like, I don't know how discussions and debates go in Israel. You can tell us, but like in Germany, especially with the German government, they for 2 years now they've been trying to recontextualizing what's going on in Gaza, always saying, okay, this is still self-defense, what Israel is doing. They always remind us, the journalists and the public, of October 7th, which is kind of weird when we talk about the genocide against Nama, which Germany has now acknowledged, the German government, the German political system has now acknowledged that it has been genocide, our first genocide. And nobody would ever say, okay, yeah, there was a genocide, but, Yuli, remember that the militias started all this, on this and this day, and killed 1,000 Germans. Like, nobody would ever try to justify our genocide with this militia attack.
Yeah, but it's not about justification, and here I want to stress it. When I'm talking about October 7, I'm not trying to justify anything. I just think it's. I was
talking about recontextualization.
Yeah, but just the same. In order to understand, I think the Namibia genocide and the first genocide that you just talked about. Yeah, you need to understand the context in which it was done, and it is a colonialist context in which the indigenous people really murdered some of the colonists, and then that was the reaction. And yeah, so yeah, I agree. I mean, nobody will say it because we're hundreds and something years later, and maybe it's somehow less important. But if we really want to understand what genocide is, I think the fact that many genocides throughout history had a triggering event. It's not necessarily a mass killing of civilians, right, or not civilians, but there was a triggering event that instilled real feeling of existential threat among the perpetrators. Now, again, I'm not saying it in order to justify it. Just if you want to struggle something, you should, I believe, understand how and what brought us there.
Are you saying that if Hamas and the other groups hadn't done what they've done on October 7th, this massacre, then we wouldn't have this genocide in Gaza now? Like we would have some kind of still occupation going and
and I have
the
no
siege
idea
of Gaza.
and I have no idea where reality would have taken us. But the fact is that we had for 75 years a regime that changed throughout the years, right? And in 1967 there was a big shift while occupying other territories, but a system of that its main goal was to preserve Jewish superiority over the land under Israel control. That was the main goal from the beginning, from day one. It was announced sometimes, it was less open other times, but basically that's what Israel is about, right? A home for the Jewish people. And then, again, different tactics throughout the years. And then on October 23, something shifted. I have no idea what would have happened and how this would have, continued in different course of events. Just like I really don't know. I can only imagine what would happen if countries around the world, and first and foremost the US, but also Germany and others, would have told Israel in late October 23 or early November 23, enough is enough. You have to stop the killing. You have to stop the bombing.
They did the opposite, right?
They did exactly the opposite. So again, I don't know what if, but I know the reality. And the only reality that we're living in is the fact that Israel unleashed an enormous amount of violence against the Palestinian people in Gaza, that from the very early days of this attack, like we're talking about October 9th and 10 and 11/23, Israeli officials, including the prime minister, including the minister of defense, including the president, who considered to be center-left person, came up in television in Hebrew and told the people of Israel and told the soldiers what they're aiming for. And they said, we are fighting human animals. And they said there will be no food, no electricity, no aid, no nothing. And the prime minister said, remember what Amalek did to you. So now everybody knows this phrase, but you have to understand that telling Israelis, Zechor et asher asa lecha Amalek, it's a phrase from the Bible, from the Old Testament, which we all learned in school. And we know exactly what it means. And Amalek basically means have no mercy of them. Kill everybody. Kill the women, kill the children, don't leave anyone behind. That's what remember what Amalek did to you means to us. It's like a dog whistle, right? So, and that's how they decided to send their troops to fight Gaza, right? So, and with the notion that there are no innocent people there, with the notion that Gaza need to be flattened. And then you immediately heard the generals, the commanders, the high-ranking commanders repeating the same notion of we're going in to destroy Gaza with a very strong notion of revenge, like we're gonna revenge what have been done to us. And then you hear the soldiers on the ground repeating the same thing, and we all watch the videos, right, of Israeli soldiers are rushing into fighting Gaza. And then you see the results. And the results came very fast, right, of really total destruction of entire neighborhoods, of millions of people who have been forcibly removed from their houses, of the mass killing. And again, we saw it very quickly, but now when we're 2 years later, and we can talk about the development of the last 24 hours, but 2 years later, we're talking about, and that's what we wrote in our report, Our Genocide, we're talking about mass killing of close to and probably over 70,000 people. Third of them are women and children, right? So people were probably most of the population got hurt or physically or mentally to some extent. forced removal of almost all people in the Gaza Strip. So we're talking about 90% of the people who got forced removed, most of them more than once. The destruction of the area, we're talking about more than 80% of the entire buildings in the Gaza Strip who got destroyed, and everybody saw the photos of that. And maybe another element which has to do with genocide is that the total destruction of social fabric. So this attack is not only oriented towards killing people and towards destroying the structure, but really to destroy the group as such, which is exactly the definition of genocide. And so in that sense, Israel and the Israeli society really moved, and the Israeli system moved from being a system of apartheid, oppression, control, into a system that is able and committing genocide.
I mean, when it comes to the ICJ and like they're going to decide if this is a genocide or not, Israel, like in their defense, said, well, whatever, you quoted all these lines from Netanyahu, from the president, from generals and other members of the government, and they would be like, yeah, I mean, you say this is genocidal rhetoric, but they were like, they're basically saying, these are just words, Yuli. These are just words. This is not the conduct, the general, actual conduct of the IDF. And that's what counts. And if the IDF is the most moral army in the world, and they wouldn't do this, and you have to ignore these words, and because only actions count.
Okay.
That's what
they're saying, yeah.
That is their defense.
Yeah, but
that's why it cannot be genocide, because genocide has to be intentional, based on the law.
But let's first.
That's what the Israeli side is saying.
No, of course, but let's first say what genocide is. And genocide is a coordinated attack that is directed and intent to destroy a group, right? A group as such. That means, it doesn't mean, again, you need to kill each and every person on this group, but to get the group to not exist anymore.
I was going to ask, like, there were 2.2 million people living in Gaza on October 7th, let's say. And now the official number is there are 67,000 people killed. Children, women, men, Hamas fighters and all this. When there are sounds kind of weird, but it's only 67,000 dead. Apparently there must be like 2 million people left. So Israel has not destroyed a group as such.
Israel haven't killed each and every person in Gaza. That's true. But
most people are still alive.
Yeah, they're still alive. But what kind of life is that? And here, that's why we need to look and understand genocide not as something that is oriented, and I know it's
not a numbers game.
It's not about no. It's not a numbers game at all. The intention need to be to destroy the group. The people can go on living, but the life of a group as such cannot go on. And when Israel is attacking the Gaza Strip, destroying the living areas, flatten most of the Gaza Strip, right? People are forcibly removed from their houses, are now in refugee camps and all kind of makeshifts, and have Israel made sure that they have nowhere to go back to. We're talking about the social destruction of this group. So it's the complete destruction of the social fabric. Right?
Hospitals, schools, universities.
Hospitals, school, the education system in all its level, cultural aspects. So a real kind of erasure of it all. Think about the family and the community as kind of a social structure that's supposed that keeps society alive, right? 40% of the families in Gaza nowadays are raising people that are not their own.
Really?
Yeah. That's crazy number, because really everything broke apart. Everything in Gaza broke apart. Now, and we're in B'Tselem, we're in a constant communication with people on the ground in Gaza. And you hear people who basically lost their ability to protect themselves and to protect their families. And this is also another characteristic of genocide, because genocide is not about specific people. It's not about individual people. It's about a group. For you to be a victim of genocide, the only thing you need to do is to be part of that group. It has nothing to do with what you personally did or did not do, what you think, what you believe in, nothing. You cannot do anything to get out of this position of victimhood, because you were marked as part of this group. Once you are part of this group, and this group was marked as the one who need to be destroyed, that's it. So in that sense, the people of Gaza, and that was in very, as you said, as we said before, very early stages of the attack, was marked as legitimate targets, as the notion of no innocent people in Gaza, including women and children, including everybody, was there from the first day of this attack. And in that sense, all the people in Gaza are the target of this attack. And you cannot measure the success. It's very strange to talk in these terms, but how much this genocide succeeded or not, counting the deaths. And not to say, I think 70,000 people, and probably many more, because many of them are just lost under buildings that collapsed. So we don't know the exact number, right? But that's not about it. It's about how you intend to destroy society. And what we saw happening in Gaza in the past 2 years is a coordinated attack with different elements, with different practices in order to destroy the group. And in that sense, I think it's hard to say it. And I know that for Israelis and also for Germans, it's very hard to hear about it and to even hear the wording. But it's kind of a paradigmatic genocide.
Well, it's important to hear about it, to get yourself informed about it, especially when you're German, because this would be the first German support of a genocide in the 21st century. And like we grew up as like, okay, we've our forefathers and Germans 100 years ago, they committed the worst genocide of all time, and we must not let that happen ever again. Right. Any genocide. And now we're supporting seemingly another one.
Yes, Germany is supporting another one.
And the rest of the world knows, and the rest of the world who has rightly so never forgot that we committed the Holocaust will also probably never forget that we've been supporting this genocide now. And I think the German political class and most Germans haven't come to terms with that. Like when you consider at some point this all will be over, and we will look back and be like, what the fuck? How could we have been part of this?
I agree with you, and I wish we haven't got to this moment, but I do believe that we'll get to a moment of kind of that society will understand, and the Israeli society and probably German society and others will reconcile with what happened. But what Israel is doing right now and have been done for the past two years. But, genocide is not something that is being done by a small group. It is something that has an ideology, and it is being done by some kind of a system that is in control. But always with support of and cooperation with the people, right? So, and in Israel, that's exactly what we're seeing today. So the vast majority of Jewish Israelis are nowadays completely recruited to this attack and have the very strong notion, and you mentioned it before, that everything that we're doing in the name of self-defense. And everything we're doing because of and as a response to October 7th. And the only way we can kind of defend ourselves is to keep this going. So in that sense, I think we are not the first people around to kind of committing genocide without knowing and being aware of the meaning of what that is being done. Not necessarily the actions and the concrete actions on the ground, because I think most of people know, but just to understand the meaning of what of what we're doing. And again, most societies that committed genocide throughout history wasn't aware that they are committing genocide.
Right. Like you said once, no people knows as much about genocide than us, Israelis. Because
maybe,
of the
maybe except of the Germans, by the way.
But because of the Holocaust, of course. Mm-hmm. When you go on Israeli media, when you talk to Israelis in Israel, and you tell them what's happening in Gaza is a genocide, how do they react?
So, first of all, I almost not. So let's talk about it.
You don't go on Israeli media, or they don't call you?
No, they don't call us and they don't allow us. And I don't think that...
You're the biggest human rights organization.
Right. And, again, 2 months ago, we published this big report that we called Our Genocide. And we described there what I just told you about how this genocide is taking place in Gaza.
And Israeli TV news, they were probably all reporting it, breaking news, right?
No, but the media in the US and in the UK and in Italy and even in Germany was reporting it.
Right. But what about Israeli media?
Not at all. So 99% of Israelis never heard about it. Never heard. I think I'm being gentle saying 99% of Jewish Israelis never heard about it. We got no coverage. I mean, we had one piece in Haaretz, which is the liberal kind of leftist newspaper, and that's it. So the reaction we got in Israel was a complete, just ignoring us completely.
Is the media ignoring you? Are they self-censoring? Are they being censored? Do they just hate B'Tselem?
No. I think it's a combination. Okay. I think it's a combination of, first, a political decision to ignore us. I'm quite sure that the Israeli government decided to ignore us because they are not, many media outlets around the world approached them and asked them for reaction before publishing pieces about our report, right? So and they gave their reactions to that. So they knew about it. And so I think it was a political decision of the Israeli government just to ignore and to kind of kill the story, right? The Israeli media, I'm not sure, I'm quite sure they didn't get an order not to cover it. But it is so far away from the mainstream discourse in Israel that I think in Israeli minds and also within the Israeli media, it's almost irrelevant. It's just like, we're saying B'Tselem report never happened in Hebrew. We're kind of, it happened in Hebrew. It was published. It was written in Hebrew and first and foremost published in Hebrew.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, it was written in Hebrew. And later translated into English, but it was written in Hebrew. And, but got complete, again, ignorement from the media. But just like, in a way, the genocide itself never happened in Israel. So just to go on Israeli media, mainstream media, and to talk about genocide is something that is very hard for me to even think about because the discourse is so much far away from that. The mainstream discourse in the media, in the political level, and also in the public discourse, just if you go outside on the street, is in a way full-on genocidal, in a sense that, I'll give you examples. A legitimate and normal discussion over mainstream news channel, let's say channel 12 or channel 13, or mainstream channels in Israel, can be medical aid to civilians in Gaza, yes or no, or it's not even a question. I mean, or just to say again and again there are no civilians in Gaza. That's normal. Surveys that were conducted lately shown, or throughout the past 2 years, shown that the vast majority of the Israeli Jewish public believe the statement that there are no innocent people in Gaza, right? We can hear things over TV like every baby in Gaza will grow up to be a terrorist. Now, these are things that really hard to listen to, but they became completely normalized in the Israeli media. And the Israeli media have a huge part in the incitement for genocide and in normalizing this kind of violence.
What about the political parties? Because in Germany, I think it's generalization, but like the political class, the ruling class here, they consider Netanyahu the problem. And if only Netanyahu goes either to jail or loses an election, and then there's like maybe the opposition leader, Lapid or Gantz, or some less right-wing politician becomes prime minister in a new government, and then the problems will be solved. But what I'm hearing is the other parties in the Knesset, most other parties, they're not against what's happening in Gaza.
No, so you have an opposition to the war that started quite late. I cannot mark the exact date, but quite late inside the attack, what I would call a genocide. You have to understand that for Israelis, there is no genocide, there is only war. Mm-hmm. Whatever takes place in Gaza is a war. It's a war against Hamas. Again, and Hamas supporters and people, the civilians supported Hamas, so they're not really civilians, and etc. But we're fighting a war, not committing genocide, and that's a first. There was a huge support for the war, and then there started to be criticism and opposition to the war, but not based on moral reasons, on the notion of hurting Palestinians, but on first
the hostages. The hostages.
First and foremost, the hostages, which is a crucial human rights issue, right? I'm not.
Yes.
I'm for it, but okay. So that's first. Second, while Netanyahu was keep kind of stalling or failing proposed deals to ceasefire and to deal to release the hostages, so for his political survivor, so the criticism rise. And third, I think we have to remember that within the current coalition, you have this fraction of hardliners, which are represented by Itamar Ben-Gvir and B'Tselem Smotrich. They are religious, hardline, right-winger, full-on extremist, racist, fascist fraction of the government. And as I said, for them, this war have to go on because they want to fulfill their vision of resettle Gaza, of complete ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian from Gaza and resettle there. And they have the same vision about the West Bank, which we haven't talked yet about, and we should. So in that sense, that's also something that Israel said, no, we don't want to send our kids to die for this kind of messianic, crazy idea of resettling Gaza. But again, all this discourse is not about the genocide. It's almost not about what we're doing to Palestinians. Now, I have to say, there is a fraction of the Israeli Jewish public that I think is becoming more and more aware of this, I would call it moral, but it's much more than moral aspects of what we're doing. And there are cracks there. And I don't know if you saw, there is kind of a movement of Israelis, and I give it just as an example, who stands with pictures of children and babies who got killed in Gaza. So they do these demonstrations almost daily. And it started with a few dozens of people, and now we're talking about a few hundreds of people who are Jewish Israelis who insist of just silent standing on the street with photos of children killed in Gaza. Now we can ask why is it so important? And I think it is important because when we're talking about genocide, we're talking about attack on humanity, on the basic notion of what it means to be human, of what basic rights that you have and the right to live as human beings. And the element of dehumanization is essential in order to conduct genocide. And while Israeli Jews insist of standing, and also Palestinians who are Israeli citizens, standing together with those photos, in a way it's kind of struggling and opposing this notion of erasing humanity out of our space. But it's not a political power in Israel, right? The vast majority of the Israeli Jewish public is not really kind of thinking of what we've done to the Palestinians.
Indeed, we need to talk about the West Bank and B'Tselem itself. But one more question regarding Gaza genocide. I read that you said it's only genocide in Gaza so far, but you said the worst is yet to come. Like it could happen in the West Bank as well, and in Israel.
Yeah. So
like an Israeli genocide of the Palestinians in the West Bank. And at some point in Israel, when these extremists
I don't know.
Can keep going.
I don't know.
Well, you said the worst is yet to come.
Yeah. But again, I'm afraid that the worst is yet to come, right? I cannot see the future. I hope not. But I can tell you what I know. I know that there is a system in control in Israel, political, right, a governing system, that in the past 2 years conducted crimes on a daily basis, that conducted genocide, and that for now there is no mechanism, that inner mechanism, like local inside Israel or international mechanism, that is able to hold it accountable, and to say, okay, that's enough. Here you stop, because that is something that you cannot do. You cannot keep killing people. You cannot keep starving people. You just cannot. And in that sense, it's the same system with control over the West Bank and the entire territory. So think about it. We're talking about the same military that operated in Gaza, the same soldiers, the same commanders, the same unit that operated in Gaza, then were deployed to the West Bank, right? And the same, so that's a first, with the same kind of mindset that they were there. Second, we see the practices on the ground hold the same logic. So the scale is completely different, but let's talk for a minute about what takes place in the West Bank in the last 2 years. Yeah. So we're talking about increased violence that resulted in close to 1,000 people that got killed by settlers or the Israeli army, which is kind of hard to defer these days, right? Because some settlers are in reserve duty. Many of them got weapons that they didn't have before, and now they have it. They wear uniform. They're not. Sometimes it's very hard to differ between soldiers on duty and settlers who are just there. And anyway, they are acting kind of the same. And
like, I heard like soldier at day, settler at night. Like this.
But sometimes settler at day and soldier at night. I mean, it's very hard to differ between the two when you get to the West Bank. So we're talking about close to 1,000 people who got killed. Not even one person, one occasion was investigated, and no one was held accountable for these killings, right? No one. So again, it's a totally different scale from what we see in Gaza, but it's still kind of
there are like Israeli activists who sometimes film these situations where there are settler attacks on Palestinians. Like
right.
This is like
on
tape.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. The Israeli system is not there to investigate and to hold Israelis accountable for harming Palestinians. And when I'm talking about a tradition of impunity, that's part of it. It's part of the fact that throughout the decades, Israel as a system, but and Israeli soldiers, but also a citizen, could hurt Palestinians in general without being held accountable, and again changed throughout the years. But I'll give you one example. Maybe you heard about it or talked about it in your previous shows. There is a village in the south of the West Bank called el-Khair, and there was a settler, Inon Levy, who got there from a nearby settlement, who entered the Palestinian village with a bulldozer and just to work inside the village and with a gun that he owns. And he shot a guy. He shot a Palestinian guy and killed him. Now, it's kind of this guy, Uda Adalin, who was a peace activist, he was a teacher. He happened to shoot his own killing. He was holding a camera and shooting. You haven't heard about it. Okay.
I saw it.
You saw it. So he was shooting his own killing, right? So you have a film of Inon Levy pointing a gun at Uda Adalin and killing. Inon Levy is still free. He's walking around. He's even got back to el-Khair more than once. And you can ask, how come? How come he's not in custody? How come? I give you one example, right? But this is the most insane case, because you say, okay, if you have all the evidence are there, the victim filmed his own murder. And still the murderer is walking around free. And that's an extreme example, not because it is extreme, the situation is extreme, but just because of this film, that you have all the evidence are there. And not only is free, he's going back to the place where the murder took place. So that's the daily reality in the West Bank. Add to that, and here when I'm talking about practices that are kind of spilling over from Gaza into the West Bank, the northern city of the West Bank of Jenin, there was a military operation there in which more than 40,000 Palestinians got forced removed from their houses in the refugee camp, and it was completely destroyed by airstrikes in what Israel called kind of reshaping the area for security reasons, right? But destroying homes for 40,000 people who are still refugee when we're sitting. So again, different scale, but same practices. And the last example is talking about Area C. You know, it's the areas in the West Bank. The West Bank is kind of the Oslo Accord, kind of split into Area A, B, and C. A are the Palestinian cities, and C are kind of the more agriculture and open area. And Area C is now almost cleaned, and I'm using it as it's a very harsh way to put it, but that's how Israel sees it, of Palestinians because of violence, settler violence, and the army violence and such. So the ethnic cleansing in this area, which is the vast part of the West Bank, is almost done. I'm saying all this because it's the same system. And while Israel is conducting genocide in Gaza, you ask why I'm so worried and why I said the worst might come. We at B'Tselem are very worried that another trigger, another something that might happen can unleash this kind of brutal violence also in the West Bank. We already see it in lower scale, and this scale can rise any moment. Now, as long as Israel won't be held accountable, and it's not by now, who can assure us that it won't happen? And also inside Israel, it's the same system. I live there as a very privileged person because I'm Jewish. But still, I live under a system of governance that is able to strip people from their basic rights, to kill dozens of thousands of people, to erase entire neighborhoods, to conduct ethnic cleansing. That's frightening.
Like the last few minutes, I just imagine that, especially like young boys from Jenin, let's say Palestinian boys, or from Ramallah or something, and they've been like growing up with this genocide in Gaza and what the settlers are doing in the West Bank, and you can easily imagine, I'm not saying another October 7th, but some kind of other coordinated attack from these young men who want to revenge their fellow Palestinians. And then we have like another maybe massacre from them, which in turn could lead to catastrophic developments in the West Bank.
I mean, yes, you portrait some kind of a scenario that is, plausible. We live within...
Because it's like wishful thinking that the Palestinians will just take it and don't do anything, right?
I think that, again, looking at history, it's really hard for me to think about people that were under oppressive regime of occupation, of military control, who didn't try to resist. Really, I'm trying to think of historical example, and it's really hard to think of. Now, by saying it, I'm not justifying any of these acts, right? It's not harming and targeting civilians is always wrong, yes. Always, in my view.
I think you are only allowed to resist against the military
in international law, but again,
yeah.
I'm
but never civilians.
Yeah, but if you're living in environment that is controlled by violence,
mm-hmm.
Of course this violence won't be kind of kept in bubbles.
Violence leads to violence, leads to violence,
yeah.
leads to violence.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what we see. But again, I don't want to portray it as kind of equation of because it's not, because you have the gap of power between. No, it's important for me to say, because it's not two sides that are fighting in a kind of equal terms. No, you have system of oppression, and you have people who are oppressed, and that is what we have in Israel Palestine. And I say more than that. I think the struggle, the trying to portray the struggle as one between Israelis and Palestinians is also something that is working to the benefit of the oppressive system.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we are just people who live there, humans
mm-hmm.
of that land, that are now need to people who believe in justice, in freedom, in equality, whatever, who need to struggle against an oppressive system that we're all living under, some as privileged citizens of it or as a privileged subject of it, and some as subject with no rights at all who consider as nothing.
If you have any questions for Yuli, go ahead. I will ask you at the end of this show. Would you say the settler conduct that you described, that they can seemingly kill Palestinians with impunity, that this settler conduct is basically an unofficial government policy?
Yes, I would say that. The settler violence, what we call settler violence, and again, it's becoming more and more hard to differ between settler violence, as we said, and
Is there a difference between terrorism and settler violence?
I don't want to use the term terrorism.
I remember, like, the Shin Bet head of Shin Bet once called the like a settler attack terrorism or something.
Yeah,
That's
they
why
have they refer to it. The Shin Bet refer to used to. I don't know. The Shin Bet is also going a transition into more authoritarian. I don't know. The Shin Bet is an authoritarian apparatus. Anyway, just leave it. But yeah, from what we know and what we see, the main goal of the Israeli regime in the West Bank is as much control over the land with as less Palestinians as possible, and doing it until now at least by ethnic cleansing of certain area and kind of pushing the Palestinians into enclaves in the West Bank, close to the major cities, and then enable full control over the territory. And that's one thing. And then the other thing is to build kind of separate, to split the area into kind of two levels of, in a very concrete way, two levels of living. One is of Israeli settlers, close to 1 million people who already live there, who live kind of, to drive from Tel Aviv to a settlement in the center of the West Bank.
45 minutes.
Yeah, and as Israeli, you probably almost won't feel that you cross the green line and you enter the West. It's very easy. For Palestinians, they have kind of sometimes a real different road set.
Yeah.
Right? So all the area is organized in a way that it will enable the Israeli settlers to keep their living, while you can basically completely close the livelihood of the Palestinians, which has been going on again and again in the past 2 years. So settler violence in that sense, or violence of settlers, is something that is also another tool that the Israeli regime is using in order to push Palestinians out of their houses. And again, if we're going back to Area C, we're talking about more than 30, almost 40 communities of Palestinians that already got kicked out, got transferred from their place of living because of what is called settler violence, or the harassment of the army. So again, it works together. So yeah, it's just, as we see it, settler violence, which Israel is not only not doing anything to stop, but also arming them and supporting them and sometimes take part in, is something that became more and more usual, not only towards kind of Palestinian small villages, but also towards bigger cities and villages in Area B and even Area A. And it's working. The Israeli government is not only aware of it, some of them is fully supporting it. So when this government, the current government, was formed, it was before October 7, right? It was a few months before. And we have a minister that is responsible, like the kind of the defense minister of the West Bank. Smotrich. Now, if you need an example of how this system works, Smotrich is a person who is supporting this violence openly, right? He encouraged them. He support them. He's part of this community of violent settlers. And he is the person who's responsible for the security in the West Bank. Now, Netanyahu can't say, it's not. No, you put him in charge of the West Bank. He's the supreme, leader, whatever you want to call it, of the West Bank. So you see it from the ground.
He's in charge of the settlements, basically.
He's in charge of the West Bank.
And the expansion of settlements.
Also, yeah.
Would you say the government is pushing Israelis into living in settlements? I ask this because I have a lots of friends in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem mainly, and they suffer from like high living costs in Tel Aviv, right? Like if you want to have an apartment, rent an apartment, or own an apartment, and then you go to the West Bank and you drive around and you see all these billboards, and you see them, and they're basically saying, "Well, why live in Tel Aviv when you can live here for much less money?"
Yeah, so yeah, you can see that definitely. I would say that in Israel, the settlements were normalized into. We don't, and at the beginning of our conversation, you said why they're voting if they're not living in Israel. It's part of Israel. Now, in this,
not like through the lens of international law. That's what I mean. Like it's prohibited under the Geneva Convention to move.
Right, and Israel never annexed officially the West Bank, and
Exactly.
but in practice,
Yes.
it's part of Israel.
Yes.
And in the mindset of Israel, it is also part of Israel. And if close to 1 million Israeli Jewish citizens living there, which is obvious to everyone that they're not going anywhere. So this is part of Israel, right? So I don't know the numbers, how many people move into the West Bank and for what reasons. Somebody probably wrote about it, and I don't know the exact numbers. I know the mindset is turning the West Bank more and more into integral part of Israel and kind of erasing this differentiation between the West Bank and what takes place inside Israel.
Is it like a strategy to make sure that there can never be like a two-state solution, like a Palestinian state with West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem? Because then the question would be like, how do you push out 1 million Jewish settlers?
Yeah, I think that the fantasy that Israel will push out settlers from the West Bank is mostly in the minds of European at the moment, and not a realistic one. But you ask if that
but it's kind of a strange, it's kind of strange to imagine like a Palestinian state in the West Bank with 1 million settlers.
Yeah, that's why I'm calling it a fantasy. But
The two-state solution, a Palestinian state.
Yes, and I'm listening to what Israel is saying, and when a few weeks ago or a month ago, Israel government declared building an area close to Jerusalem called E1, a Palestinian area close to Jerusalem, and they approved building a few thousand of apartments there, right, for Jews. So settlement, and that's a very controversial area because it is actually the final splitting of the West Bank. It's north and it's south from each other. So it will be a kind of part of the West Bank that is completely Jewish and kind of close the ability to move from north to south. And Smotrich stood there. And again, Smotrich, we're talking about one of the probably three most powerful people in Israel politics today, right? A minister in our government, and he stood there and he said, now we are burying the idea or the fantasy of two states. But he said something more in that specific announcement, and he said we're also burying the fantasy of Palestinian people. And so I'm saying it's not only that the Israeli government is kind of not going anywhere with the notion of Palestinian self-determination, but also it's an attack. What the Israeli government is doing today is also about erasing the notion of Palestinian as people. And in Israel, it's a real and legitimate discussion whether there are or there isn't Palestinian people.
Yeah, I know people who just call them Arabs.
Yeah, it's something invented. There are no Palestinian people. It's something that you hear in Israel again and again. So when we're talking about the erasure of the possibilities, it's much more dangerous than erasing the notion of self-determination to the Palestinian people, or the concept of the Palestinian having a state or whatever. it's about erasing the notion of the Palestinian as a group. And here, again, you can kind of have the connection between what takes place in Gaza and how we got there and other things that are not yet full-out genocide, not at all in the West Bank, but the signs are there, the conditions are there, and my fear is that it's not necessarily going to take much in order to see the genocide spill over into the West Bank.
Let's. I have a few minutes left until Raya will ask you some of the audience question. Real quick, you led Breaking the Silence from 2012 till 2017. We've done an episode on Breaking the Silence. Look it up in the archives. Then you, as you said, left Israel, came back in August 2023 to join B'Tselem, right?
No, I came back a bit before, but I joined B'Tselem on mid-23, yeah.
You're an executive director of B'Tselem since 2023. Who's funding B'Tselem? Where's the money coming from? Like does the German government still support B'Tselem?
No, not directly, but
not directly.
No, not directly, but
indirectly.
No, we don't have. Anyway, our funding is on our website, and everyone is welcome to go and see it. We have funding from private donors, from governments. Most of them European governments or state entities that are European, and from private foundations around the world. So
I ask because I remember the German Foreign Ministry always had a list who they were financially supporting directly. Breaking the Silence, for example, B'Tselem. Is that still going on?
Yeah, I have to say that I don't know who they're funding directly at the moment. B'Tselem not, but
no,
but I don't think it's a.
Do you want money from a government that is supporting what you call a genocide in Gaza?
No, I mean, if we won't get funding from government that are, I mean, most of the West is supporting the Israeli. I mean, the European Union is supporting Israel, right? So, and we do get funding from the European Union. So, in that sense,
but you're in Germany here, and the German government has a special role.
Yeah, but again, I don't think that, for me to go into the discussion of who we are getting funding from is
no, but it's a question of justice. Like if the German government would be like, hey, Yuli, nice NGO you have there, great work. We support human rights in Israel and Palestine. Do you need money?
Yeah.
Would you be like, sure?
Would they take money from the German government?
Who is helping the Israeli government?
So I'm telling you, we also get funding from the European Union, which is also involved very much in cooperate with Israel. Now, part of what we are doing and demanding from the world and from foreign government is to, once you see what you see in front of your eyes, and that is it's not only a government, it's a regime that is conducting genocide. I think what every person needs to do and every entity and around the world need to do is to do whatever in their power to stop it. So to use any mean they can in order to stop it. I don't think that funding human rights organization or stop funding human rights organization is definitely is necessarily the way forward in that sense. But they have a lot to do in order, if they wanted, in order to stop Israel, which
it's like
they are very, very, very far from doing.
Right. But it's like I don't know what you call it, but it's not pink washing, but like a German government be like, hey, we're supporting the other side as well. This is like we know this from other regimes.
Of course, yeah, and there is kind of a whitewashing. That is taking place around the world all the time. I can only say that we're trying very much to be aware of it, and we're trying to do our work and to stand with our values and our principles and our agenda. And what I can assure you is that we, as B'Tselem, but I think other Israeli and Palestinian human rights organizations as well, we will never shift our agenda according to what donors or whoever tells us, right? And I think B'Tselem proved it again and again, that we have principles, we stand with our principles. Now, the funding issue is a complex one, right? Because we're also... we are in some sort of jeopardy in that sense, because the Israeli government is also now promoting legislation that will
like foreign funding or something?
Yeah, for that will, if it will go through, won't enable Israeli human rights to keep working, because it will block the ability to get funds from abroad and from foreign countries in order to operate. So it is a complex moment. I think, that it's less about who funds who and more about what is being done with this funding. And what we're trying to do with this funding is struggle the Israeli regime.
Yes. Well, no question, you're doing great work. I was just curious because I knew that the German governments or administrations before were supporting B'Tselem. How many people are working at B'Tselem besides you?
Yeah, we're about 40 workers, half Israeli Jews, half Palestinians, Palestinians from within Israel, from the West Bank and from the Gaza Strip. It's kind of unique setting today to work Israelis and Palestinians together, and or to do this kind of work, to struggle together, and to struggle in that sense of demanding a fundamental change in our political system.
How is B'Tselem different to Breaking the Silence that you were a director of? Because Breaking the Silence, I remember, I think you were the only female member of Breaking the Silence.
No, I wasn't the only female member, and they have many, and there were the female directors before me and after me.
But you were talking about chauvinism
as a part of our
Breaking the Silence,
of part of our society, and Breaking the Silence is a different organization because it's an organization of ex-soldiers.
Yes.
Of Israeli soldiers who served in the IDF and in the Israeli army, and is now and came out and gave testimonies actually about what they did and saw in the West Bank and in Gaza. That's a very internal Israeli discourse. What B'Tselem is different in a sense that we are an Israeli organization in which Israelis and Palestinians working together, and within the context of polarization that our society is going through. And I'm saying polarization because it's a condition to conduct genocide. You have to kind of take society apart and mark the ultimate other, and to separate people from each other. It is a unique position to be in, to wake up in the morning and work with Palestinians. I can tell you that as an Israeli, I live in two parallel universes. I have one universe, which is my Israeli universe, in which there is no genocide, there is only war, in which people are sad and broken because of the hostages, because of soldiers who got killed, because of the ongoing war in Gaza. And then I have the world, which I'm grateful and feel very privileged to have, and this is because it's has much more to do with reality. And this is the world in B'Tselem, in which I work with people that are not only Jewish and not only kind of constrained in this story, in this imagination of Jewish society at the moment, and that see reality in a much closer way to, I think, how the world see it. Now, it's harsh reality to look at, right? It's a reality in which there is genocide in Gaza, in which the West Bank is basically on fire, in which the risk of things to get worse is rising every day. but it's much more true, I guess.
I was asking because B'Tselem regularly publishes reports not only on Gaza and what you call a genocide, on apartheid in the West Bank,
Right.
and what the settlers are doing. You also recently, a few months ago, published a report on Palestinian prisoners. Mm-hmm. You called it "Welcome to Hell,"
Right.
and today is October 9th. We still don't know if there's going to be a ceasefire or the end of a war or just like a hostage deal.
Right.
But in Western media, it's only about of course, about the Israeli hostages. But in return, Palestinian prisoners are supposed to be freed, and you did a report on them.
Yeah.
Can you explain what you found out?
Yeah, so we published it over a year ago, but
Yes.
The bottom line, which is harsh one, is that the Israeli prison system, which, by the way, is under the control of the same Itamar Ben-Gvir, the far right hardliners that is in control over the police as well, turned into what we couldn't call in any other way as a system, a network of torture camps for Palestinians. So as we sit here and speak, there are close to 10,000 Palestinians who are being held in Israeli prison as what Israel call security prisoners, right? So the vast majority of them is held without a trial, just being held as an administrative detention or under other laws that Israel have with no trial. And most of them will be released without knowing what they were taken for, right? So in that report, Welcome to Hell, which was called, by the way, we heard it from prisoners who got released and said that when they entered the detention center, one of the guards told them, "Welcome to hell." So in that report, we interviewed more than 50 Palestinians who were held in Israeli detention centers.
After they got out?
After they got released, the vast majority of them, and I'm saying vast, it's almost all of them got released without knowing what they were taken for. So they never heard any accusation and they just got released. So obviously they're not people who, most of them, are not people who done something very dangerous. And all of them told us about torture that they went through. So it starts from the condition in jail, daily violence, physical violence, deprivation of food, of medical aid, sexual harassment, deprivation of sleep. I can go on. So the conclusion that we got, and we're talking about 16 different detention centers. Some of them are military detention centers, and some of them are civilian detention centers, right? So the only conclusion we can get to it at that point, and it's still in place, nothing changed since then, maybe for the worst, is that basically each and every Palestinian who will be taken by Israel into detention centers will go through torture with no relation to what he did or didn't do. And again, the vast majority of them will never know what they were taken for. So this is another element of what the Israeli system turned into after October 23.
Are we talking only about male prisoners or also,
No, also
female and kids?
Also female and minors.
Minors are being tortured.
Yeah. I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying each and every person we talked to, including women and children, were tortured. So in that sense, again, it's, the Israeli military system, the Israeli prison system was never what Itamar Ben-Gvir called a kindergarten or a summer camp for Palestinians. But since October 7 and since Itamar Ben-Gvir was appointed as the minister who is responsible over the prison system, and since October 7, 2023, we see a drastic change in the attitude. By the way, it's not only, we heard it from prisoners who got released, but the IPS, the Israeli prison system, do a lot of PR pieces to the Israeli media. And they're saying it. And they are filming a lot. They bring Israeli reporters into the Israeli prison system and shooting the conditions of Palestinians and the violence, and they are very proud of it. So it's not even, it's quite shocking, but it's kind of, that's where we are. It's something in Israel today, wrong treatment and torture of people, of Palestinians, is something to be proud of.
Yuli, thanks so much for coming on the show. Raya will ask you some of the audience questions that have come up during the last 2 hours. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and thanks for supporting Jung Naiv.
Thank you. Hi, Raya.
Yuli, hello. So, 10 more minutes. I know that you have to go on time. Okay, so obviously with this topic there has been like
a few questions.
Exactly. So people were discussing a lot, but also asking questions. First of all, there's someone that wants to thank you, saying thank you for what you're doing. We see you and we stand with you in solidarity. I mean, that's always nice to hear.
So thank you.
And also the question asked by this person is, do you think the religious right in Israel has won all public discourse?
As one public discourse?
I guess I'm reading what the person has said. I guess.
Yeah. The religious right, not necessarily. I think the public discourse in Israel today is very much nationalistic. As I said, it is genocidal in most part. It's rarely, there are very few occasions where you can hear a real opposition to the narrative of kind of or something that criticizes the ongoing violence against Palestinians. And we do have some media outlets that are very much right-wing, and they are very popular in Israel. So you can mention Channel 14.
Yeah, you talked about it before.
Yeah, and Channel 14, which, if anybody knows what happened in Rwanda in the early 90s, before the genocide there was this media outlet called Radio Rwanda, which was a full incitement against and then incitement to genocide. And Channel 14 in many aspects is that. It's a very right-wing, also religious, nationalistic and religious channel that is considered it's the second most watched channel in Israel, right? So it's there. I wouldn't say that the religious right won over all the Israeli media.
Like, how do you talk to people that consume this? Like, when you meet them in Israel or whatever, how do you deal with them?
First of all, it's most of the Israeli public, right? I mean, that's what most people.
Sure.
That's what they hear on the mainstream media. It's not. You don't have to go on Channel 14 in order to hear incitement for genocide. It's all over.
Of course.
Like I said, the notion that there are no innocent people in Gaza is said in almost every mainstream media outlet. It's not. I have to say that for me personally and for my colleagues, and it's hard. Yeah, I mean, again, it's not hard like what the hardship that Palestinians going through, but it's hard to be part of a society that hold this kind of blindness to what we become.
But are you still trying to win them over or have like real discussions? Or do you feel like in a face-to-face discussion you cannot really change anything they're thinking?
No, I do, and we do. But we're trying to be realistic about it. So just like Tilo asked and I said, we're not invited, and I think to go on Israeli mainstream media and to talk about the genocide in Gaza, just as I talked about here, is not very realistic. They won't invite me, and they won't be able to hear that. It will sound like something that what the hell is she talking about? It's so far away from them. But, 2 weeks ago, we had an event in the center of Tel Aviv. You can find it online. We called it in our YouTube channel, in B'Tselem YouTube channel, we call it How You Resist Genocide. איך להתנגד לג'נוסייד. And we invited people, a panel of people who were taking action, Palestinians and Israelis who are taking action against the genocide. And 200 people came to come and listen to us on that evening. So it's a small portion of society, but I see it as an essential one because, again, a society that's going through a process of rising fascism, a society that's conducting genocide, the ability even of a small group to oppose it, I think, have huge meaning, not necessarily because we're gonna win the political, debate or. No, I'm realistic. It's not about that or win a political power, but because I truly believe that in the face of genocide, there is huge value of standing firm with your values. And I'm thinking about the future, and I hope that the future of my home, of the place we're living in, will be a future built on people who can recognize. Or that believe in humanity, both Jews and Palestinians. I know it's very far to think of at the moment, but and that believe in justice and that will be able to really face and reconcile with what our society did.
Then let me refer it to what you've been saying now, because you're saying it's my country. And one question, was there Jewish Israelis who left the country because they disagree with the politics? Didn't you ever have that thought as well? Didn't you ever think, I don't know, I cannot deal with this anymore? Was there ever a certain hopelessness?
I don't want to instill hopelessness in others, but I also don't want to lie. So no, to be sincere, yes. I mean, it's very frustrating to live in this kind of reality and to go on with these atrocities that go on day by day by day by day, and to be in contact with people on the ground in Gaza and in the West Bank, and people work with me, and we are very close, and we talk very often, and to see that as much as we're trying, we're not really able to save people. And I think that's something that is really hard to hold on to and to keep going. But part of what gives me the motivation to keep going and to stay there is, again, and I know it might sound a bit of cliche, but I don't mean it that way, is the fact that in B'Tselem and in other small enclave of activism, we can find this common ground between Palestinian and Jews, not as two different kind of people, but just as the people of the land who commonly see the wrongs of the system we're fighting. So, and that kind of instill hope into me that, again, it's a very far away now to think about, but I mean, there is another way. This really imaginary story that I was grow up upon, that we have to endlessly fight in order to survive, is a story. And stories can change.
Well, that's a hopeful angle for sure. So, I mean, we talked about it right now again, and also you talked about it with Thilo, but the live viewers were pretty invested in understanding more about that one-sided narrative that is being shown to them by the government, by the media. And something a lot of people were asking was everybody in Israel speaks English, or almost everybody. So how come, if they can read foreign media, foreign news on their phones, how come it isn't called maybe ignorance about Gaza, fully self-inflicted and maybe even intentional?
It's a very good question, and I'm being asked a lot. So, first and foremost, Israelis in general are getting their news and getting it in Hebrew. It's just a thing where Israelis doesn't read foreign media. I know
that's super interesting because, like, if I talk to other people, most of them say, like, after all these years, I know that I have to consume English media or media in English, media from there.
I agree. It's strange, but that's a fact. That's first. But I'm not saying it to defend Israelis, because if they want, they can. They know English, right? Israelis know English in general, and they have internet, and they can go and look at everything. And here we get to the propaganda. I don't think that the problem of Israelis at the moment is that they don't know or don't see what takes place on the ground in Gaza. It's true that the Israeli media doesn't show them that. But in general, everyone have a picture in their heads of the destruction of Gaza. What they do think is that the accusation of Israel intentionally attacking civilians and attacking people in Gaza and committing genocide is a false accusation. So let's take the starvation issue. There was the propaganda that the Israeli government pushed forward and most Israelis buy into is that it's not starvation in Gaza, it's a starvation campaign of Hamas around the world, right? So when they see the children that are being starved, some of them dying, most of Israelis will know to tell you the background diseases of the children that were shown in international media about. Now, that is exactly how propaganda works.
I mean, that was also shown a lot in German media, actually, by big outlets.
That's fine. But but if you ask, if people want to understand why Israelis are so really don't accept this notion of that this is what we're doing in Gaza. So I would say it's a combination of not knowing the scale of it, knowing and have explanations for it, explanation like this is what we have to do, or thinking it's denying it, right? And combine those three things together, and you start to understand the mindset of the average Israeli. Again, and I'm not trying to justify any of it. I hope it's clear. But I think, I grew up in Israel, very obsessed about the Holocaust. And, like many other Israelis, and I guess like many other German in our generation, right? And I kept asking myself, why growing up in Israel? How come? How ordinary people allow this to happen? How they knew and kept on living? And for the first time, I don't have the answers yet, but I can see how it happens. Because I live in a society that's going through exactly this process.
So you would compare it actually?
In that sense. I mean, it's people who live while a genocide is being committed by their society. Yes, in that sense, it's not only the Germans, it's other people who went through this.
And do you believe that with all the feeding of ideology, do you think it's possible for the population to de-radicalize at some point?
The Israeli population?
Yeah.
I have to believe that we will be able to do that. I have to. I mean, and I do believe it's possible because, there is nothing fundamentally different about Israelis than other people.
Oh, really? Okay, but that's like a big point. How come you say that?
Because Israelis are people, just like the German are, just like other. But I mean,
sure,
humans.
but the level of propaganda is very different to other countries.
Right. So I can ask you back: did the German society were able to kind of reconcile and change after committing genocide?
I mean, I was
It
not...
took. Our viewers know that it took long time, decades, actually. In your case, right?
I mean, we're still not done actually processing that and learning from it completely. I just mean like it's a bit different in how you're being fed propaganda from a young age on in a certain way. Like, I don't know, claiming Palestinians or Arabs are dirty animals or whatever, and that they're a big threat to the population. So I think it is a bit harder here to read, like de-radicalize, no?
So I'm not sure. I mean, hard, of course, and again, we're talking about a society that is conducting genocide, but also a society that was brought up into, and we talked about it, within an apartheid framework. And how do you shift from that? It's a long process that, again, we saw other societies doing that and struggling with it. And it's not only about de-radicalize. I think it's about, in a way, decolonization, right? That will have to happen at one point. It's going to be a long process. Again, as someone from that group, as an Israeli, I feel like I really have to believe that it is possible. And I have to say that I don't see a real reason why not. But it will be a long process. And we're very, very, very far away from. And I think the world have a lot to do with how fast we'll get there. Because enabling Israel to keep going with its practices in the current regime of apartheid and genocide to get away with impunity for the crimes it is doing. And that is kind of to ensure that we won't get there anytime soon, right?
Sure.
So the Israeli system and Israelis have to somehow understand that what we're doing is wrong. And again, the world probably have a lot to do with helping them and us to getting there.
I think these are very good last words because I know that you don't have this much time and we're already stretching it.
Okay.
So, Yuli, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And dear viewers, thank you for being here with us today, for watching, for commenting, and also for supporting us. Have a good one and take care.
Thank you.